trending shift several years ago. So please welcome Leah Chandler.
Good morning. Thank you. Thank you. I have a little video, and I was sharing with Aaron earlier. It's actually an Adobe video, but I thought as I was preparing for this presentation, this was very relevant. So.
Peter, come take a look at this.
Mr. Daniels.
Mr. Daniels.
Look at this.
What's this? The numbers, they keep getting bigger and bigger.
Clicks are off the charts.
Yeah.
Yoshi, it's Walter. We're back.
Yes, sir.
More shifting.
I need more trees. More trees? I'll get you more trees.
Hey, take a look at wood pulp.
Well, everything you got on wood pulp right now.
He really loves that thing.
So I think that speaks to a challenge we all have, kind of understanding where our data is actually coming from. As marketers, you know, we live in this world of data, and I use all the time the term analysis paralysis, sort of swimming in so much data that we don't really know what is true and what is real and what is relevant. We're sort of sometimes, I think, struggling to come up with how we apply those insights to an actual marketing program or marketing plan. And sometimes you're in a situation, which I find myself in now, where we have little or no data to work with at all. I use an example because not only do we sometimes have no data, but sometimes we use poor data, or we have struggles trying to understand what the data actually means. And I use a couple of tourism examples here, and I shouldn't be talking trash about other tourism destinations because this could happen to anyone. But in Lithuania, the head of their tourism department was fired a couple of years ago after investigative journalists realized that they were using images in their tourism campaigns that were actually from places like Norway and Finland and Slovakia. So ironically, the title of this campaign was called Real is Beautiful. Unfortunately, this wasn't real Lithuania. And then, of course, people started to spoof on this, where they started taking pictures of places all over the world and saying that this is Lithuania. So we don't want this to happen to us. Rhode Island had a similar experience in 2016. Also, CMO lost their job there when, they were featured very mercilessly when they came up with this campaign, and actually a tagline and logo that preceded the campaign where they talked about, Rhode Island being cooler and warmer, and people didn't really know what that meant. And it did come out in the press that this was not researched. Again, people started to spoof this and took it to very uncomfortable levels in lots of different social media posts. And we asked, where was the research, and could some of these blunders been avoided? So as Steve mentioned, I am the CMO of a very new destination marketing organization, Discover Puerto Rico. We are officially 40 days old today, so we just opened our doors on July 1st. Last year, through bipartisan legislation, the DMO was formed after tourism had been housed under the Puerto Rican government for about 80 years. So as you can imagine, anything that's managed by government has lots of different challenges. But every time there was a new governor, every time there was a new tourism director, the brand messaging changed, logos changed, taglines have changed, and Puerto Rico has been a victim of those changes, not being able to really establish a concrete brand identity and not being able to really get any traction as a tourism destination. You add to that, decades-old labor issues, austerity measures, a 2-year-long Zika crisis, and then last year being hit by a Category 5 hurricane September 20th of 2017. So you can imagine that no one needs research and a foundation for a brand identity more than our island does. So this is a picture of our team. I was the second employee hired. We have since built out a team of about 40 people. We have about 15 more positions to hire. So we've now privatized tourism on the island and are kind of starting from ground zero, really deciding what we want this destination to be, how we are going to move it forward, and how tourism can be a true economic driver leading the recovery of the island. So, the new DMO, I was working with some of my staff people, talking through what we wanted this presentation to kind of communicate, and one of them said, I feel like we've been ghosted. I feel like consumers don't really know who we are anymore. They've sort of lost our number, or consumers maybe they have our number and they're just kind of letting our calls go to voicemail. And maybe some of you as organizations and companies are having the same struggle, trying to get consumers re-engaged again, or get consumers engaged at all. It kind of begs the question, if consumers don't know us, do we really know ourselves? I mean, what's important for me to share with you today is that our island is ready and it's eager to welcome tourists back. On the island, the DMO is really the best hope that we have for a full economic recovery. In fact, tourism affects 17 segments of the overall economic sectors across the island, yet only the island's GDP only accounts for 7% of that coming from tourism. So you can see where we have a huge opportunity. We're a Caribbean island. How can tourism be such a small percentage of what the overall economy compensates for? So we really see this as Puerto Rico's moonshot moment is the phrase that we're using locally, and we're communicating with our own partners. We have to get this right, and data is going to play such a big role in that. So this feels like me most days right now. New job, new mission. We have a new team. There are very, very high expectations for what the DMO is going to accomplish, and very, very high pressure. So, as we've been talking about here, where do you start? And certainly the data is going to be very, very critical to that, just like it was in Branson when 5 years ago I came to that destination, trying to ascertain really what that community meant to consumers. So we were starting to ask the questions, what kind of data was currently available? We sort of inherited two organizations, one that was leisure focused, one that was meetings focused, and had to combine that all under one DMO umbrella. Surprisingly, we inherited very, very little data to work with, especially in terms of primary data. So a lot of the marketing plans had previously been built on things like SCIFT reports, secondary, tertiary data that really was interesting overall if you're looking philosophically at just trends in the tourism space, but was not super helpful to what was actually happening in Puerto Rico. So where are our highest value potential markets? How strongly is the year-old hurricane news still impacting visitation? The only research that we really had to work with was no longer applicable in the space we were moving into. So we started to launch into action immediately. Actually, even before I started this job, I was still at my old job, and it wanted to get research going very, very quickly because we knew we couldn't build out a plan that was going to achieve the things we needed to achieve without having research. So I won't go into all of these. Some of you will know what some of these studies are, but Visa View data obviously is cardholder data. This speaks to the people who come to our island. They're using Visa. How much money are they spending? What categories are they spending against? How long are they staying? What markets are they coming from? Website usability, website persona, you understand what those are. A brand health study was put underway almost immediately. We started doing creative messaging on existing campaigns and found some very interesting things prior to the DMO coming on board. We were using a lot of celebrity endorsements. Louis Fonsi, who we know and love as the singer, songwriter who wrote Despacito, was starring in many of our campaigns. We were spending a lot of money for him to star in those campaigns. And when we started testing in the States, we found out that no one knew who he was. Of course, everyone thinks Justin Bieber wrote Despacito. So, we could have filled in that role with many people, many capable people, many cheaper people on the island who could have executed those. So these were just, it's kind of marketing 101, but we weren't asking the questions. So we're also looking at gap studies, trying to figure out which markets have high potential for us but haven't been tapped yet. And of course, your standard Google Analytics, Facebook Insights, all of these things working together to help us get a better picture of what we're up against. So We're very much still in the process of receiving and analyzing this data. We know that the key to meaningful insights is revealing the patterns in all of this data. There's not going to be one study that is going to be a silver bullet for our marketing efforts, but we know that layering all of this together will start to reveal things that are going to help us build out that marketing plan. Each of these insights is really a building block for the foundation of the brand, and eventually, these insights ladder up to things like the brand positioning, the brand identity. We'll be working on logos and taglines. When you see Discover Puerto Rico here, and even in this presentation, that's a transitional logo. We just took on the name Discover Puerto Rico when we opened the doors. We inherited See Puerto Rico, which was the existing leisure brand, and Meet Puerto Rico, which was the existing meetings and conventions brand, and now have a brand name that will hopefully live well beyond all of us. But we will work towards that visual identity and eventually campaigns. So, to give you an idea of kind of what we're working against and things that we're talking about internally and how we're going to move the brand forward and differentiate from our competitors, as Steve mentioned, we play this little game, kind of guess that destination. So we look at, what is our competitive set doing? Who are these brands? Do we look like one of these brands? When we talk about sort of a sea of sameness, which was the name of this presentation, I'm in a literal sea of sameness. You can see from these Instagram account screenshots, we all look quite similar. I mean, would you be able to tell from these images which one is Puerto Rico? That's because none of them are Puerto Rico. This is the Dominican Republic, it's Bermuda, it's Mexico. I tell my team all the time that a Caribbean island promoting beaches is like Vegas promoting gambling. There are inherent things that when you tell people you're an island, that there's probably beaches there. So what do we do to get beyond that messaging? Because we've been playing in that space for a very long time. And when you live and you market in the Caribbean basin, that's a very crowded sandbox, no pun intended. We have literally so many great destinations all around us, and we have great beaches. We have 2 of the top 10 beaches in the world, but most consumers are not going to be able to differentiate us by those beaches. So we do the same thing looking at websites, whether it's Miami, whether it's the DR, St. Pete, Clearwater. We're all kind of swimming in the same space, trying to figure out what could make Puerto Rico different from this competition. We call this kind of anybeach.com. We're working through many different layers of this research to say, I would be remiss if I said that, our research is showing that beaches are a driver. We know beaches are a driver and we don't want to walk away from beaches, but there has to be something that we can mine out of the research we're gathering in order to really show Puerto Rico as something that is different. So to give you a quick, and some of these are eye charts, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them, but we did just conduct brand health research. We worked with a company called Strategic Marketing and Research Insights. We wanted to talk about how the island is really perceived against our competitive set, what messages are motivating and drive interest to visitation, and kind of what our best geographic targets are. You think, well, you guys have been around 80 years marketing Puerto Rico. Don't you know what your markets are? Honestly, the markets have been decided in the past based on airlift. So where do we have people flying into? Where do they have the most access? Well, let's market to those people. But there are a lot of other potential markets that we're finding out. We've been focused very heavily on the East Coast, but what about Chicago? What about Dallas? We're finding that there are people in those markets that are also very interested in what we have to offer. So we conducted this research, knowing we were designed, the DMO was really developed to attract leisure business and meeting visitors, and we have to understand how we are positioned in order for us to really be able to move forward. So we started gathering these insights, and as they came in, it was sort of like we were turning the lights on for the first time. Little by little, we kind of started to see these patterns align. All of a sudden, it was kind of like we flipped the switch on in terms of we were kind of marketing in the dark, and now maybe we have a flashlight. So we're not all the way there yet, but we know that as we continue to gather this information, we're going to be able to paint a much clearer picture of what we should be marketing and who we should be marketing to. So we ask consumers, when you think of visiting Puerto Rico, which descriptions or emotions first come to mind. You're looking at brand attributes, personality ratings, perception markers. All of this can get very, very, very confusing. But through layering the many points of data together, a picture has started to emerge of a destination that, frankly, is plagued with neutrality. So you think, well, you've just come out of this hurricane, and we're coming up on the one-year anniversary of that, so you're going to be seeing a lot of it in the next few weeks. Surely everybody has a negative perception about visiting Puerto Rico. The lights still aren't on, the water isn't safe to drink, all of which is not true. But we're figuring, we're going to go into this and find that there's a major negative perception about the island. But what we found is people really have no perception of the island. I don't really know which is worse, but we know that we're working in complete white space right now. Everything is sort of in clay as we try to build an actual brand. In most destinations, and I think with many of your businesses, you're likely inheriting a brand that consumers have sort of already decided for you, and you can reposition that brand, but you already kind of have an idea of who you are. And that's very different now in Puerto Rico. We're understanding that the brand is very neutral, has very little brand position, and we've got to figure out a way to set that up and then break away from the pack. So what our research is establishing now is beyond the beaches, there is a true opportunity for us to sort of plant our flag in culture and authenticity. So I hate to throw around the word authenticity because it's so overused, but if you've been to Puerto Rico, there is a true authentic culture there. The Puerto Rican dance, the cuisine, the music, art, history, architecture are so important to the people of the island. It's such an amazing place for a rich experience that really can go beyond the beaches. We were hearing things in the research with people saying it's lively, it's colorful, it's beautiful. And we feel like planting our flag in that space, which honestly no one in the Caribbean basin is owning that right now, gives us an opportunity to move ahead of the pack and kind of break away. Again, with supplemental support of beach images and beach messaging, we don't want to pull away from that in November and December when we're marketing on the East Coast and everybody's buried under snow. So it's still an important message, but given the right time, given the right people, making sure that it's getting to the right audiences. So of course we know destination marketing, it motivates travel, but done correctly, it can actually differentiate a destination. Again, there's a couple eye charts here, but what I really want to pull away from, what I really want you to pull away from this is just the simple averageness of the destination that we're working with right now. Currently, we're positioned in the middle of the pack. This was destination familiarity. We looked at some of our comp set, South Florida, we looked at Mexico, we looked at Hawaii, the Caribbean overall. Where does Puerto Rico fall there? Right smack in the middle. The same when we started to look at competitive product imaging. What you see here in the green are our competitive set who are over-indexing in some of these product image categories. What you see in the red is our destinations who are under-indexing in some of these categories. Us are right in the middle. Again, just kind of showing that we have a very average position that we're working with. The same for product image. When we talk about our competitive destinations, Hawaii's positioned as very beautiful, it's very outdoor friendly, it's natural resources always rise to the top. When you talk about Mexico, they're scoring very low in safety. So you've got the good, you've got the bad, and then you've got Puerto Rico riding the fence. So when we talk about personality image, the existing personality, we believe, combined with improvements on this messaging of our product being very authentic, being very rich in culture, is something that is going to increase visitation and interest to coming to the island. I threw this in here just because it kind of speaks to the lack of equity that we've had in past brands. We tested with consumers some of the taglines of our competitive set and then the leisure brand that we inherited, which was See Puerto Rico, and said, of all of these slogans, which ones do you associate with which destinations? See as a slogan was most associated with South Florida. So we did this in our website testing as well. We are often referred to as the island of enchantment. And actually on the island, locals like to use this. They've been using it for 80 years. They think there's so much brand equity in it. When we tested this in our digital research studies, people most associated that with Hawaii. So again, you don't know what you don't know until you start doing this research. You think you have an idea and you think some of these things have been utilized for a long time. There's got to be some significant equity there. But what we're finding again is that the equity hasn't been built yet, and there is complete white space for us to start to build that out. I didn't put all of these words up here for you to read them or for me to read them, but just to show that there are so many words that are used to describe the brand. There are so many positions that have been tried in the past to try to execute a true tourism brand for the destination. And we still have a long way to go. But through the studies, we're definitely working through a very systematic approach. Brand research was really the first step in understanding that brand. The highest potential customers are guests for the brand, and the most effective messaging strategies ultimately for the brand. It really is just the beginning for us. We are at day 40. We know that once this brand architecture is in place, testing is going to continue on those brand identity concepts. So all of those go to quantitative testing. Any logos, any taglines, any creative concepts will go through focus group testing. That's very, very important. It's a slow process, and it's a somewhat painful process sometimes, but we feel like it's the right process. What I don't want is for the DMO in 6 months to be sharing, with our constituents, with our staff, geez, I wish we would have. I wish we would have done this back then. Do I wish I was here showing you sexy videos or like hot celebrity endorsements? Yes, and I think those will come, but ultimately we have to lay the foundation for this brand in order for it to really launch for the first time ever and to make an impact for the island for years and years to come. We're confident that this intentional approach of wrangling this data is going to lay that foundation, and we believe that we're poised to really have the biggest tourism comeback in history with this island. The product is there. We've got an amazing, supportive private industry that is backing this. And while we're not a part of the government anymore, we are funded by the government in a way that is giving us a real chance. So with that, I would open it up for any questions or turn it over to Steve.
Leah, thank you very much.
Sure.
We have questions. I have a whole bunch of questions myself, but I want to start with you guys. Yeah, Andrew. Oh, Mike.
You're in such a middle of this fascinating sort of geopolitical thing where you've got the President of the United States, who is the world's largest mouthpiece, or whatever we want to say, sort of not really acknowledging Puerto Rico for what it is. And at the same time, you have people on the other side of the political spectrum who would love to elevate the pain and suffering of the people and sort of reinforce this idea that Puerto Rico isn't ready because there's all this suffering happening down there. Do you find yourself having to ignore both of those sort of extremes and try and rise above it? Or are there bits and pieces? I mean, there's a very public battle between the mayor of San Juan and Washington, D.C. So how do you acknowledge sort of the reality of those two battling fronts? Or do you just sort of set a new course?
That's a really good question. I would say the simple answer is we rise above it. The challenge we have right now is that unfortunately Puerto Rico is sort of being used as a pawn in media and politics. The worse that Puerto Rico looks, then the people who have something against the president can continue to bring that up and use that. It's only hurting our destination. What we've tried to communicate with journalists, with our consumer audiences, with our meeting and convention audiences, is that we are ready. And I live there. I live in San Juan. I wake up there every day. I can tell you, we have 138 hotels out of 142 hotels that are open. We are ready. The convention center is ready. 2.5 weeks after Hurricane Maria, the cruise ports were open. We just had a record number of cruise passengers embarking in Puerto Rico. So the island really is ready. What we've tried to communicate to journalists is please cover the progress. In fact, if you have your computers open and you go to CNN, we just launched, we got a huge pickup today with CNN on an article that we pitched that was really about, if you remember the SOS sign, that came out and went viral, where we had locals in Umacao in the middle of the island who wrote SOS in paint in the middle of the street, and it was captured by a helicopter. And that event went viral. This past week, they repainted. They power washed the SOS off, and they repainted Buenvenidos, basically saying welcome back to the island. And we had a drone capture that footage, and we pitched that to CNN and said, please cover the progress, because there has been so much progress. There are so many stories of resiliency on the island, and the best way that people can help the island is to visit. And every time a negative story comes out about the electricity or about water quality, it hurts the people of the island. We need tourists to come back to the island, and to continue to kind of be used in the mainstream media as everything that is wrong. I know some journalists think they're helping us because they're going to get the attention of the federal government, and there's going to be more aid, or there's going, to be more timeliness next time around. That part's over. I mean, now we need people to visit, and we're trying to stay out of that political fray and really focus on getting visitors back.
I have a couple of questions about destination marketing generally and how it's working now, and whether some of the targeting and segmentation that digital makes available changes the game at all. Are you still aiming towards that big brand logo and message and catchy phrase that gets pushed through the big broadcast vehicles and then echoed in digital? Or is there the possibility here to target segments with somewhat different images and pitches for Puerto Rico? Are we at that stage yet? Can destination marketing use those tools to maybe break down its own branding so it's not just that single umbrella message that is supposed to be the catchy phrase that everybody associates with a place?
Right. We need all of it, all of the above. So we are going to be starting with a big brand. When we talk about the brand identity and execution of the brand identity, we do need a logo. Whether or not we need a tagline, I don't know. When we tested brand identities in Branson, no taglines rose to the top, and we said, forget it. How important is that? It ended up not being very important once we started testing that, once it was implemented. So I'm not going to die on that hill of having a sexy tagline, but we do need a logo. We do need a logo that's been tested and that we know resonates with consumers. So we will implement that, and there will be a large-scale brand campaign, and we're working on some of that that's going to be launching in fourth quarter that will ladder up to the eventual unveiling of the brand identity in Q1. So we still are in this transitional phase for Q4. But we are going to put out a new campaign that you will see is very rooted in culture, and that can, again, ladder up to a new brand launch in Q1. As far as niche audiences, it's extremely important to us. I think we have to kind of crawl before we walk and walk before we run, so we'll get there. We're doing, again, a lot of research right now on potential for LGBTQ plus markets to be a very strong audience for us, surprisingly. That audience feels very unwelcome in most Caribbean destinations, so we think we can find some real ownership there because our island is extremely friendly to that segment. We're looking at luxury as a segment. We're looking at golf as a segment. We're looking at couples and honeymoons and baby moons as a segment. So there are a lot of potential for us to niche market, and I think many destinations are doing that. If they're not, they should be, because that is a huge driver right now for destination marketing.
What?
Hi, Matthew Kenyon with Live Intent. Thank you, this was wonderful. Two quick questions. One is piggyback off the question earlier. You mentioned getting the word out, and it's good for the island, for Puerto Rico. Are you doing any type of marketing in-house on the island, why that's important? And then a lot of the leaders, like when I turn on the TV, it may have been a little longer ago, and you're smiling at it, but the leaders, of course, you're kind of combating that. They're asking for funds and telling how bad it is, because I think that plays into the political question. My second is on more of a positive note. Maybe some of the thinking that went into, I just looked at discoverpuertorico.com, it looks great, congratulations.
Okay.
But then I went to discoverpr.com, and it's not owned, FYI. So I didn't know, was there any talk of, and how do you make that decision of Puerto Rico versus PR.com or Discover PR?
Okay.
And that was my...
Great questions. In-island marketing will be handled by PRTC. So PRTC is the Puerto Rico Tourism Company, and they were handling all leisure marketing before the advent of the DMO. So they still exist in a regulatory fashion. They're in charge of air service development, cruise ports, signage, visitor experience on the island, and they are still in charge of on-island marketing. So the Puerto Rico Tourism Company will handle that, and that is still an important component so that the brand is conveyed throughout the island. We still want islanders to travel east and west and north and south, and that's a piece of the economy as well. So yes, that will happen. It's not going to fall under the DMO. As far as the website, we, again, inherited 2 of everything from PRTC and Meet Puerto Rico. We inherited 2 websites, 2 social media agencies, 2 digital agencies, 2 creative agencies, 2 social strategy. I mean, literally 2. It's like the arc of destination marketing. So we are trying to kind of consolidate where we can. The websites were both in not great shape. So to put it lightly, the back end of one of the websites had not been touched since 2010. So as you can imagine, any change that we try to make on the website, it is essentially going to crumble to dust. So we're trying to be very, very cautious to get through website usability testing right now. We have RFPs on the street for digital development, so development of the website. And we're hoping to launch that with the brand repositioning at the beginning of Q1. We went through when we went through the naming process, we did buy up things like Descubre, which in Spanish is discover, so Descubre Puerto Rico. We had, we're coming to the game about 80 years late, having a DMO. So a lot of your typical extensions of Visit XYZ, Explore XYZ, all of those things were bought up. So we're finding even on our social channels, our Twitter handle is discover_PR because we couldn't get Discover Puerto Rico. So it's kind of on a case-by-case basis what we're buying and what we're using.
Leah, thank you very much. Leah, by the way, is going to be hosting our roundtable on risk management at the end of the morning, appropriate enough. Thank you, Leah.